In this video, we will look at the importance of financial planning and why it's so important for any investor. There are two core reasons. First, it helps you identify your actual investment horizon to identify the right asset class that you should be investing in. And secondly, it helps you plan for your financial goals. By planning in advance, you can ensure that you don't fall short in terms of money at the time when these goals actually come due. Now, the reason the investment horizon is such an important factor is because of the way the risk in equity reduces with time, as can be seen by the study we've done of Sensex returns over the last 20 years, and how the range of returns reduces very substantially as your investment horizon increases. Effectively, as this data shows, equities are highly risky in the short term, are medium risk over the medium term, and become virtually risk-free over the long term. Now, the benefit of the actual investment horizon helps you plan for your longer term goals by taking advantage of the power of compounding, helping you make much smaller investments for larger goals. And it also, by knowing your actual investment horizon, you can manage your emotions a lot better in a weak market because you know that markets are likely to rebound and you're not in any immediate requirement of these funds. On the other side, for your short to medium term goals, you should always avoid equity because of the risk of forced redemption in a weak market if you do not have time for the markets to recover. The second important reason of having a strong financial plan is to help you plan for your financial goals. Now, it's important to understand the impact of inflation. 20 lakhs of expenses today would become almost 1.5 crores of annual expenses in a 30-year period because of the very strong impact of inflation has in compounding costs over time. Now, most of our longer term goals get impacted by this impact of inflation. These longer term goals are very easy to ignore in the short term because they aren't immediately kind of relevant. But if you don't plan for these in advance, they become difficult to meet in the future because of this impact of inflation. Now, how do you counter the impact of inflation? You basically do this by taking advantage of the power of compounding. 2 lakhs invested today would become 1.5 crores over a 30-year period at a 15% return. By starting to invest early, you can invest substantially less and still meet these large goals in the future by taking advantage of the power of compounding. In the next video, we will have a look at the typical life path for most families. In this video, we will look at the typical life path of most families and why it makes financial planning so important. There are two important financial considerations: the sheer lumpiness of your core life goals and an underappreciation of inflation and compounding. Let's look at the lumpiness of life goals first. If you look at, and this is just an example client that we've taken, but if you see goals tend to be lumpy: education, house, and retirement. These expenses tend to be first large and lumpy, and if you don't plan for these in advance, you may have to make significant compromises in the future because of how large these expenses can be for most families. Now, lumpiness is a repeated pattern that we've seen. We'll just show you a few confidential examples of certain actual clients that we've done financial plans for. And you'll see that lumpiness is true for virtually most people that we've created plans for. Client A, client B, client C, client D. Lumpiness, large lumpy goals at later stages of your life is something which is extremely true for virtually all families and which is what makes financial planning so important. Let's look at the second major financial consideration is an underappreciation of inflation. As shown in the previous video, inflation can have a substantial impact in the costs over time. 20 lakhs today will be worth over 1.5 crores of expenses 30 years from today because of the impact of compounding of costs that inflation has. The only way you can counter this is using the power of compounding. We'll just show this in a slightly different way. The same 20 lakhs of annual expenses if you invest today will become over 13 crores over 30 years, which is substantially more than the 1.5 crores that inflation has had. This is assuming a compounding of your investments at a 15% rate in equity. Now, the typical life path followed by most families. because of an underappreciation of these two factors is there's a level of financial complacency that takes place during the ages of 30 to 45. Income during these points are greater than expenses, and most of your major lumpy goals are far away. As you get into the age group of 45 to about 59 is when financial pressure starts to build up. You start seeing some of these larger expenses such as your child's education, your child's marriage, and retirement is around the corner. Now, if you've not planned in advance, your retirement ages could be times of financial stress. An underfunded corpus could lead you to have to rely on others or have to significantly downgrade your lifestyle during what should be the golden ages of your life. The benefits of a good financial plan. It basically helps you reduce the lumpiness of your expenses by investing small sums every month for large lumpy expenses in the future. To take advantage of the power of compounding and helping make your money work for you. And it helps you meet your life goals and not have to rely on others some point in the future. In our next video, we will look at what are some of the major financial goals that you should be planning for. In this video, we will look at what are some of the major financial goals that you should plan for. Now, it's important to understand that your financial plan is unique and tailor-made to your specific and unique requirements. One of the important things from a financial plan is time. You need to break your goals up between your short-term goals, which would include a contingency fund, a piggy bank fund, travel funds, etc. Your medium-term goals, such as the purchase of a car or a home, and your longer-term goals, which could be your retirement, your kids' education, kids' marriage, etc. Let us examine each of these goals one by one. Retirement planning. This is the largest expense you are likely to face in your life. You basically need to plan for a minimum of 20 years of inflation compounded expenses, which is why it is very important to start early so you can take advantage of the power of compounding to counter the impact of inflation on your annual expenses. Child's education is another important goal for any family with kids. It's important to understand that education costs are rising in India and overseas education is expensive, which is where you need to again plan for this in advance. There are certain other expenses related to children that families may want to plan for. This includes their children's marriage, having a corpus for their child at a particular age, or planning for inheritance that you want to leave behind for your children. The purchase of a home is another important goal for most families. It's a very important milestone in any family's life. The timing of your home purchase is something which is very important because it can have a substantial impact on the financing of your other goals. A contingency fund is another important goal to plan for. It basically means keeping aside somewhere between 3 to 6 months of your monthly expenses to take care of any sudden loss of income because of a job loss or any unplanned large expenses that may come about. A piggy bank fund is another goal that certain families find useful, where you set aside a certain amount of money regularly to fund certain lumpy larger consumption expenses that may happen over the course of a year. Other goals could include specific consumption goals such as planning for an annual vacation or the purchase of a car. Apart from this, there are various other types of goals that could include planning for a specific corpus that you want to reach by a particular age, buying a vacation home, buying a farm, or even a yacht. It's important to remember that these goals are unique to you. So you need to identify what is important for you and your family and plan accordingly for those. There's no right or wrong answer. In our next series of videos, we will look into each of these goals in a slightly more depth to understand how to best plan for them. In this video, we will discuss how do you plan for your retirement corpus. Retirement planning is very important for two key factors. Firstly, your retirement corpus is likely to overshadow all your other expenses over the course of your lifetime. And secondly, you need to meet between 20 to 30 years of inflation elevated expenses during your retirement. Now, how do you plan for your retirement? There are three key numbers that are important from a planning perspective. The first is what are your current annual expenses? what is your planned retirement age, and what is your expected lifespan. Now, there is a right way and a wrong way of calculating your annual expenses when it comes to planning for your retirement corpus. The wrong way is the use of certain simple online calculators, where you basically just estimate each of your monthly expenses to try to come to your total monthly expenses and therefore your annual expenses. This very often in our experience leads to a significant underestimation of what your true annual expenses are, because you tend to forget the impact of non-monthly lumpy expenses such as your vacations, special occasions, appliances or car purchases, etc. The right way of calculating your annual expenses is calculating how much do you really spend. Now, basically, your actual expenses is measured by your post-tax income on an annual basis minus how much you've saved. Anything you've not saved, you basically spent. And this will give you your true estimate of how much you're actually spending on a per annum basis as compared to trying to estimate it by adding monthly expenses, etc. If you do choose to try to estimate, it is important that you use a trained consultant who can understand what are some of these expenses you may leave out, because it is very dangerous to underestimate the amount that you're actually spending. Now, another important criteria for you to consider is what is the post-retirement lifestyle that you would choose to live. Would it be equal to your current expenses, where you are leading effectively whatever your existing lifestyle is? Do you choose to downgrade post-retirement and simplify your lifestyle, leading to a fall in the annual expenses post-retirement? Or would you actually prefer to upgrade your lifestyle because you now have time to really spend, you now have the time to spend on things that you really truly enjoy, right? You can go for longer and international vacations, you can spend more time on hobbies, etc. This could lead to an increase in your retirement expenses. This is why your post-retirement lifestyle and how you choose to spend your retirement is there's a certain either multiplier or a certain reduction in your current expenses that you need to consider while planning for your retirement in terms of how much you plan to spend every year. It is highly recommended that you commit your retirement corpus amount to memory, because it helps you stay committed to investing when you know that you have to plan for such a substantial sum of corpus in the future. In our next videos, we will get into planning for your kids' education and other requirements. How do you plan for your child's education? It's important to understand that there's significant inflation in education costs. If you look at costs in India, back in 2000, annual school fees would range somewhere between 5 to 25,000 rupees per year. This cost has now increased to somewhere between 1 to 5 lakhs a year, depending on the school your child is going to. If you're looking at the overseas costs, look at the change of exchange rate. 43 rupees would buy you $1 in 2000. It'll now cost you 73 rupees to buy that same $1. Right? So overseas costs are inflating apart from actual inflation in education costs in the home country, also because of the impact of the depreciation of the rupee. Now, education inflation is not going away. It is important to understand that the costs in future is likely to be substantially higher than the education costs today, which is why it is important to plan. Now, how do you plan for something when you don't know? Is your child going to study in India or overseas? Is your child going to study medicine, engineering, commerce or arts? Are they going to do post-graduation at all? Will they get a scholarship? Honestly, when your child is still young, there's simply no way of knowing this. Which is why it is best to be prepared. It's important to understand that money is fungible. If you've saved extra, if you're over prepared, you can always use part of your kid's corpus to plan for your retirement, as part of your corpus, to buy a vacation home, etc. But if you're underprepared, you can get into all kinds of financial difficulties. Now, how much should you plan for overseas education? These are just some broad benchmarks that we've got. The annual tuition costs range somewhere between 30 to 50 lakhs at the time of recording of this video. This would mean a cost of somewhere between 1.2 to 2 crores for graduation, or 60 lakhs to a crore for post-graduation. The graduation and post-graduation overseas would cost somewhere between 1.8 to 3 crores. How about in India? Indian costs could range anywhere between 2 lakhs to 15 lakhs per year. Therefore, graduation could cost anywhere between 8 lakhs to 60 lakhs. Postgrad could cost anywhere between 4 lakhs to 30 lakhs. And therefore, you're looking at a range of graduation and post-graduation ranging anywhere from 12 lakhs to 90 lakhs if your child is going to be studying in India. Now, this is just a summary of these costs that we've discussed. Now, it's important to understand that these are just benchmarks. There can be much cheaper and much more expensive options. Travel, food, lodging, books, etc. could be substantially more. And scholarship loans and your child working while studying are also possible. Right? So these are certain benchmarks that you need to use, but ultimately the costs that you need to plan for are subject to your unique requirements and perspectives. Now, why is it important that you need to prepare in advance for your child's education? Let's just look at the impact of inflation. Now, we've taken a newborn child and we've just assumed that you're looking at a parent who wants to send their kid overseas, and let's assume the current cost is somewhere between 2.4 crores. By the time the child turns 18, this 2.4 crores annual education costs of today will rise to over 8 crores. Now, this is an extremely large sum, which is also likely to hit you at a time when retirement is around the corner. This is what makes it unaffordable to most. Now, if you are clear that you want to send your child overseas, and it's important to understand the similar principles apply even for a more expensive education in India, or even for more affordable expenses in India, inflation costs will always remain. This is why it's so important to start early. For this 8 crore corpus that we've taken in this example, if you start saving when your child has just been born, you can achieve this 8 crore corpus over an 18-year period by saving just 70,000 rupees every month. However, if you delay planning for your kid's education until your child turns 10, instead of 70,000 rupees a month, you will have to save 4.5 lakh rupees a month. This is why it is so important to start early. Now, rise in education costs are here to stay. Education is likely to be a significant drain on finances at a time when retirement is basically around the corner, which is why it is so important to plan for this and start investing early, which substantially reduces the total levels of investment required. In our next video, we will look at planning for your home purchase, which is another very important goal for most families. In this video, we will look at planning for your home purchase from a financial planning perspective. From a financial planning perspective, there are three main criteria. You need to plan for your own contribution. You need to look at the impact of EMIs on your financial plan. And you also need to look at your home purchase in the context of your longer term financial plan. Now, while planning for your home purchase from a financial planning perspective, if you are taking a loan, you don't need to plan for the loan amount. You need to plan for the equity that you'll be paying in terms of the down payment, in addition to other costs such as registration and the costs of doing up your house. You need to secondly look at the impact of EMIs on your longer term financial plan. If you buy a home too early, this could impact your ability to invest because the EMIs basically drain all of your income. This can impact your ability to use the power of compounding to plan for your longer term goals, which is why it is typically recommended that you don't buy a house too early when you've not been able to start saving for your other longer term financial goals and take advantage of the power of compounding. Thirdly, from a long term financial plan perspective, you need to look at the budget for your home in conjunction with how much you're planning for your retirement and kids' education and other such goals. If you end up spending too much on your home, it could impact your ability to plan for your retirement and kids' education. And this is a very common mistake that people make because they end up thinking that it's a once in a lifetime purchase, let me go and buy the house of my dreams. But then it could have a very adverse impact on your ability to plan for your retirement and education. What is a contingency fund is what we will discuss in this video. A contingency fund basically is a fund where you invest a certain amount of corpus in low risk debt funds to meet any unplanned sudden large expenses. This could include medical emergencies or the sudden loss of a job or any other form of large unplanned expenses that were unforeseen. Now, what are the benefits of a contingency fund? Having a contingency fund in place helps ensure that you don't need to redeem your long-term savings, which could lead conceptually to forced redemptions in weak markets if you did not have a contingency fund in place. There are two things to keep in mind while planning for a contingency fund. You should plan for somewhere between 3 to 6 months of expenses. This basically gives you enough time to find a job in case of a job loss. And your contingency fund should be used only for contingencies and never for any other purposes. In our next video, we will look at another important concept: why systematic transfer plans or STPs or systematic withdrawal plans or SWPs are so important from a financial planning perspective. In this video, we will look at why STPs and SWPs are as important as SIPs when it comes to financial planning. Now, SIPs or systematic investment plans basically help mitigate market volatility and spread your investments across a range of market conditions. SIPs are something which are very well known by most investors. STPs and SWPs very often aren't. Yet, these are as important as SIPs to help you deal with volatility in markets. Now, a good financial plan can effectively fail if markets fall at the time when your money is required. This is why, somewhere between 2 to 3 years prior to your goal date, you need to start one of the two. Either you start a systematic withdrawal plan, where you start making systematic monthly withdrawals from your higher risk equity investments. So you're spreading your withdrawals over a period of time, or you start a systematic transfer plan, where you systematically do monthly transfers away from equity to low risk debt. SWPs and STPs basically help mitigate the risk of a sudden fall in the markets at a time when you require the money during your goal date.